With me in the studio is the right-wing campaigner and best-selling author Ann Coulter, one of the very few people Donald Trump actually follows on Twitter. And joining from LA is the writer Laurie Penny. Good evening to you both. First of all, Ann Coulter, does fake news damage society?
Yes, that's why Donald Trump keeps attacking it. I mean, we live in democracies. People have to be informed. And for people at allegedly serious networks to be putting out lies about it. I mean, we went through, this happened long before Trump, but all the fake rape cases. Ferguson ripped the country apart. The alleged, shooting of an unarmed black man. And once Trump came along, it's been through the roof.
But if you're in a situation where you're in an election campaign and a website which gets hits from nearly 800,000 people says that members of Hillary Clinton's campaign were involved in a satanic cult, that matters, doesn't it? Or does it not? Should the tech giants be actually filtering this stuff?
No, the internet is the only place people can get the truth. Maybe not from the website you just cited, but 800,000 viewers. Hillary spent $1 billion. This idea that, bots putting likes on Facebook swung the election is so insane. That's fake news.
So listen, you believe that things like CNN, ABC, NBC actually don't double-source stories and put out fake news?
It's worse than that. They are intentionally putting out fake news. The claim that Donald Trump admitted to groping a woman's, blank is a lie. He says on the tape, and they edit the tape to lie about it.
Laurie
they
Penny,
let you do it. You could win that as a summary judgment case in court, and they edit that part out of the quote.
Laurie Penny, is it damaging to have not only fake news, but actually the idea that it doesn't necessarily matter? Laurie Penny.
Well, you've hit on something quite important there, Kirsty. The distinction between censorship and what's going on now is important because, look, fake news, what we've come to call fake news, which is actually lies, the point of that is not just to spread lies, it's to make people unsure of the distinction between what is true and what is false. And when people can't, to erode trust in the news media, which is what Ms. Coulter is trying to do right now, erode trust in honest journalistic networks. And look, when people cannot trust their media, they would often prefer to believe convenient lies to hard truths. But, there are still people out there who believe in the power of honest journalism, who believe in the power of, in real democracy, which involves people being really informed. And there are people out there who believe that people in power shouldn't just be allowed to dictate what is true and what is false. And, some of those people, Ms. Coulter, are sitting around you in the studio right now. There are people who are working in the BBC studio, and some of those people are watching at home, people who believe that there is a distinction between truth and falsehood, and that distinction matters. I would encourage you,
Yeah, well, let me visit Ann Coulter. You're in a situation where if you're saying that the mainstream news networks regularly pile out fake news, aren't you just aiding the despots who say, it's all about fake news from CNN, even the BBC, so therefore we won't believe it? You are aiding people by undermining the probity of the mainstream media.
No, I'm actually citing lies that have been put out. It doesn't mean you don't believe everything, although that's where I think people would be erring. I mean, I do agree with your guest that the issue is censorship. Yeah. Who's deciding? I've just listed, including some categories of lies, 20 lies that have been and continue to be put out by the media. The claim that Donald Trump mocked a disabled man, not only was that a lie, but the Washington Post knew it was a lie because the video proving that was a lie, they took down from their webpage. And your only lie is some website said Hillary's part of a satanic cult. Okay, how about she defended a rapist, her husband?
No, hang on, it does matter if a lie is told. So about
of
the satanic cult, it really matters.
May I come in here?
It matters
yes,
if
Laurie
a lie
Penny
is told about Donald Trump.
Are you finished?
Satanic cult
doesn't
strike me as
Laurie
much of a
Penny.
lie.
Ms. Coulter, are you finished?
Laurie Penny.
Are you finished? May I speak? Thank you very much.
You just
So
wasted
the word
30
salad,
seconds.
the word salad that you've just heard come out of Ms. Coulter's mouth is exactly what we're talking about. What she wants to do is not to make a distinction between what is true, what is not true. It's just to confuse people and make it easier for people in power with no scruples to just decide what is true and what is false. And now Ms. Coulter is a troll with no credibility, and so is her president. But we should not take this as, the basis on which we can decide what is true and what is false.
But what do you actually do, Laurie Penny? Because once you start essentially filtering or censoring, then who are the deciders? I mean, there's other things. There's no things necessarily as absolute truth. There's shades of truth, aren't there? And there are nuances of truth.
Well, that's why we have journalism. And journalism, as you know, Kirsty, you've worked at the BBC for a long time. Everybody around you in the studio has worked at the BBC for a long time. Journalism is still a thing that exists and matters, and there should be a distinction made between what is journalism and what is an opinion on the internet.
Let's say about checking on things, Ann Coulter, because we already had the situation where you retweeted what purported to be a Muslim man attacking a young Dutch man. You retweeted it, and then you've got 1.8 million. Donald Trump retweeted it, and you didn't even know where it came from. You tweeted it without checking it. And you're a person that actually, you're a polemicist, you're somebody that's in the public eye. Do you regret that now?
No, I've seen no proof that it is untrue, point one. Point two, your question is the correct one. Who is deciding what's true here? Again, I keep citing things...
It wasn't true,
Wait a second. I keep citing things that are provably false.
True, though.
Your guest says... journalists will decide. Well, Walter Duranty said that there were no Ukrainian famines. Our country was roiled by the Ferguson shooting for a year. That turned out to be the biggest lie finally admitted by the media.
That's not true.
Thank you both very much
indeed.
Explain it to us. Well, I say it adios, America.
I say adios, America.
Right. What it means is that the nation that has been so welcoming to immigrants, to women, to children, is an amazingly successful nation. And the Democrats do it for the votes. The rich do it for the cheap labor and the cheap maids. They strut around like they're Martin Luther King. No, who is our immigration policy hurting? And this is the post-1965 immigration. We're bringing in millions and millions of people from very poor cultures, from very backwards cultures. No, our social programs are for the American poor. They are for
Let me just point out to you that you're
for the
sitting at this
American
table
working
next
class.
to two immigrants, and I don't think either of us qualify as poor maids. But I wanted to ask you, what's your family's immigration story? Are you a Native American?
Why, yes, I am. I'm a settler. I'm descended from settlers, not from immigrants.
Oh, it's not a Native American. You were, but I have a question for you.
It's just an
No, if you mean
Were you already here when the
if you
pilgrims
mean
showed up? Were your people here?
Well, no, but I'm not living in Cherokee Nation, so I am not an immigrant to Cherokee
Neither
Nation.
am I.
I'm living in America, which was created by settlers, not immigrants.
I have a question.
But
can I
the point
interrupt you
is
for
it's
2 seconds, please?
Yes, the poorest who are being...
I have a question. My mom taught me when I was younger, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And why do you think that it's important? Why do you think that's important to mudsling and have these words that obviously touch the hearts and souls of so many people of America being said when we're taught something different as a child? Could you explain that to me? And why do you think your success is based off of that?
Well, I'm at least talking about policy. You have a position on what people's names should be. Watermelondria. I mean, you'll insult people for their names. I'm talking about a government policy that affects all Americans and immigrants and the people living here, and is harming our country.
So you
don't follow it.
Are you
I didn't ask
against?
you. Okay.
Are you against all immigration or just illegal immigration?
No, right now, the entire immigration system, the bureaucracy has got to be shut down because it is being used to serve, again, the business elites, the upper classes, the people who get to have all the cheap maids. It's driving down...
Again with the maids.
Well, it's true, though.
But that's not all
driving
immigration.
down. This is what has led to... Well, okay, but...
No, but my mother came to this country in the 70s because there was a shortage of medical professionals who could do the job.
That's very unusual,
this year, not really.
No, yes, it is.
There's also
yes, it is. What we have...
Have you been to a hospital lately? There are many doctors from Pakistan, India, a lot.
Fabulous. But the point is, okay, but whenever people talk about the immigrants we like your mother, they cite the immigrants that aren't the majority of immigrants coming in. So fine. Fine, okay, if they're going to be doctors,
you know what, Ann,
but when we have a majority of immigrants are on welfare, why would any country bring
Americans
in...
are on welfare,
why would,
period.
No, but why do you bring in people?
Anymore. They've sent their jobs overseas.
We can't do anything about... We can't do anything about criminal Americans, about poor Americans. We don't need to be importing other countries' poor people.
But there's so many other things to talk about besides being an immigrant
who lives
basher.
here?
Man, come on.
Yes, but they
Who
don't
lives here
sell
and votes here?
They don't sell votes.
This is a very good...
So then are you for just rich immigrants coming in, but not poor immigrants coming in?
Well, right now we have 42 million foreign-born in the country now. It's very high. I think we need a little time to assimilate the ones already here, and then set up a system where we get immigrants like your mother, and not look. Most of the wealthy keep saying they want to go.
We all would like to say. Really, we have to go. I'm sorry to cut you off. So I'd just like to say, muchas gracias for being here.
Geraldine wants to know simply this. What's your solution to Afghanistan?
That's a great question. I mean, it was going rather well under Bush. The problem is Obama, throughout the campaign, the presidential campaign last year, in order to appeal to the liberal base, kept referring to Afghanistan as that was the good war. That was the important war, the war of necessity, as he called it, as opposed to little Iraq, which was just the war of choice. To the contrary, neither country attacked us on 9/11. It was Osama bin Laden, who was a nomad who just happened to end up in Afghanistan. The Taliban didn't want to attack the U.S. But Iraq was beautiful for regime change because, like Iran, I might add, you had basically pro-Western, educated young populace with lunatic leaders, whereas in Afghanistan, it's not good for regime change. It's not good for U.S. air power, where we dominate the rest of the world. Iraq is. It was much better just taking Kabul, getting rid of the Taliban, and having a presence there. By focusing on Afghanistan as the big war, I think Obama's gotten himself into
What's the solution,
quite
Anne?
a mess.
What's the solution was the question.
The solution is to invent a time machine, go back during the campaign, and stop referring to Afghanistan as the war of necessity.
Duncan L. is asking about the culture of victimhood that you talk about. Are you implying that groups such as women, blacks and gays unfairly portray themselves as victims?
It's slightly different from that. It's more that liberals use these groups as cat's paws to promote heinous policies that then go on to create real victims, like the culture of single motherhood that you mentioned in the introduction. One example I'll give you from last week when Obama was speaking at the memorial to the Fort Hood victims. There was a crazed jihadist Muslim who shot up, I don't know how well known this is in Europe, shot up an army base here in the U.S., killing 13 troops. Okay, then there's a memorial, and as Obama is eulogizing the victims, he mentioned one of the women soldiers and said she was a single mother, and she did this and that, and then the last sentence was, and she leaves behind a loving husband. So you realize she's not a single mother now. Single motherhood is being cited as if, you know, she graduated magna cum laude. She won the Medal of Honor. She was a single mother. It's a feather in your cap. And I think this encourages, I mean, sometimes it can't be helped, obviously, but also, obviously, the rate of single motherhood has gone up through the roof with it being glamorized in Hollywood movies and glossy magazines through government policies.
B agrees with much of what you say, he or she says, but says, do you think Condoleezza Rice will run for president in 2012, and which voters do you think she'd attract if she were to win?
That's a great question. You know, I give a lot of speeches, mostly on college campuses. I prefer a hostile audience, but sometimes to Republican groups. And her name comes up all the time. Republicans love Condi Rice. And my only caveat to that is having supported for president Pat Buchanan, Steve Forbes, Alan Keyes, Pete DuPont, he was governor, but governor of a very small state. I think before somebody runs for president, he or she should run for something else.
Right.
You know, United States Senate, governor.
All right, Vera West asks you, is it hard being a conservative, straight, white, American woman these days?
No, I find it a lot of fun.
Right, Big Daddy, finally, and simply asks, why can't Anne devote her talent towards bringing people together rather than dividing them into armed camps? Isn't the country, your country, the United States of America, already divided enough, Anne?
I'm trying to bring them together under principles of small government, freedom, pro-life, and national defense. If they'd just join me, we'd all be together.